So, welcome everybody. It's Lucas here. Today's show is called Sleep It Off, and I am joined here with Stella Loichot. I hope I'm saying your name. Your last name's a tricky one for me. You have to correct me. Stella is certified by the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching. She's trained in a whole bunch of different modalities, including behavioral change, motivational interviewing, weight management, diabetes prevention, and a whole bunch of other things. She's got a book called Sleep It Off. You can learn more about her work at alonzcoaching.com. And we'll link up to all of this in the show notes. Stella, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So, part of your book title is about weight loss, but I want to get into that. But before we get into that, maybe you could just give people a little bit of, putting together, focusing on a book, no matter the size of the book or the size of the project, is a big deal. So usually it's something that you're really passionate about. What made you really interested specifically in sleep? Did you have a sleep problem? Did you have a partner who had sleep problems, or what was the impetus for the book?
Yeah, the reason why was that really I was struggling with sleep for many, many, many years. I'm a very light sleeper. I am not very good at sleeping. And also it's just, I don't like to sleep. Yep. There are so many other things, I want to do in my life. So for many, many years, because I was not good at sleeping and I also didn't enjoy it, I just kind of not quit sleeping, but, stopped sleeping enough. Yeah. And I ended up sleeping about, 5 hours every night on a regular basis. Yeah. I loved my life. Everything was wonderful. Yeah. I could do so much. It was so, enriching and exhilarating. But then what happened is that I had been struggling with my weight for many, many years, and I had finally been able to get it all under control. I had found a way, to maintain my weight without, worrying about it, even when I was moving from one country to another, when I had 3 kids, like I was in charge of my weight. And then slowly I saw that, I was losing control. The weight was starting to creep up again. I was getting sick. Like a lot of things started happening. And it took me a while to finally connect my dots and realize that the issue was that I was not sleeping. And when I realized that, I kind of collapsed, actually. Yeah. And from there, I decided, okay, I need to sleep more. Except how do you do that when you're not good at it and you don't like it? Yeah. If you still want to keep a life, that's enjoyable. And that's when I started the research. And after I did fix my sleep, I worked with a lot of clients who want to lose weight or, be healthier. And I realized, oh my gosh, like 90% of them are sleep deprived, but they don't know it, just like I didn't know it. And that's when I decided to write a book to just put the message out there for everybody, even if people are not working with me,
So I worked almost exclusively in weight loss from like 2000 and maybe 2009 to 2014 or something like that. And it's so strange in weight loss, things kind of go in cycles. And suddenly we're at this weird cycle again, where it seems like everything I find on social media, everything I find on YouTube is a calories in, calories out discussion from like 1980s, 1990s. Suddenly it's back in vogue and everybody's talking about this again. And it's just so strange. When we were running conferences around the world and things like this, we had a whole coaching team. And of course, calories are one component of weight loss. It's something to think about. But one of the biggest things that we would discover working with clients is exactly like you said, sleep. And a lot of times what happens is the example that I often give people is people will go to a dinner party or they'll go out late or they'll go out for a meal and they'll eat too much and they'll wake up the next morning and they'll say, I feel like I put on 5 pounds. And they literally look down and they feel like they're bloated, and they are bloated. And sometimes that's from the food, but very often it's from really poor night's sleep, and they have chronic low grade inflammation. That's measurable. It's something they can get their blood work done and see. And these kinds of things, people just don't really connect the dots. In fact, I think a lot of people think about sleep deprived people as being kind of thin Wall Street, work all the time, workaholics. They burn off everything because they're working all the time. The reason I brought up the calories in, calories out is because it's a very, very kindergarten approach to weight loss, and it's coming back in vogue again. And then people think, well, I was up for, 20 of the 24 hours yesterday. I must have burned an extra 500 calories. And it's just, you're your body's just not that simple. It's not that simple. There's so many different things going on. So to kind of set the stage for people, help people understand what's going on when you don't sleep and how that, there's a whole bunch of different ways, but some of the different ways that can lead to overeating or inflammation or weight gain, some of the obvious and less obvious ways.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as you were saying, it's just so complex. There is so much happening, right? So when it comes to weight loss, maybe we can just focus on a
Yeah.
few things that are happening. So one thing that is happening, especially with people who have a tendency to go to bed too late, which
Mm.
is, by the way, a natural tendency for human beings because we are not meant to really have a 24-hour cycle, right? A 24-hour day. We're meant to have like a little longer than that, like
Mm.
24 and 10 or 11 minutes. So we have a tendency to push our bedtime later and later. And they've done experiments in where they put people in a cave with no outside cues at all. And they realized that these people have a tendency to go to bed about 10 minutes later every
Huh.
single night. So that's a very natural tendency. So a lot of us, we have a tendency to push back that bedtime. And the problem with that, one of the problem with that is that the first hours of the night are actually when we are releasing a huge lot of growth hormones. And, growth hormones are what, some athletes are doping on when they want to be more performant, right?
Mm.
So, and we produce that naturally. And we're meant to produce that mostly like in the first 3 hours of the night if we are asleep at that time. So when we push back our bedtime more and more and more, we can miss out on that release of growth hormones. And I remember, my grandma used to tell me, oh, the hours of sleep before midnight count double. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. But actually, it's not completely that,
Mm.
false, especially when it comes to growth hormones. And why are growth hormones important when it comes to weight loss is that, well, growth hormones help us build muscle mass, lean mass. And the leaner, the more lean mass we have, the more calories we actually burn, even while sleeping.
Yeah.
So it is a very important factor when it comes to weight loss. So that's one thing. And that's why it's so important to try and go to bed when our body is ready for that and is asking for that,
Yeah.
and even go to bed a little bit earlier. But the other thing that happens is also that we regulate appetite hormones when we sleep. So there are two hormones that are involved in our appetite level. There is ghrelin that pretty much makes us hungry. And then there's leptin that tells us, okay, you had a meal, you're full, you're good to go, you don't need to eat more. And the thing is, when we sleep long enough, those hormones are in good balance. So you feel hungry during the day and then you eat and you feel good. But if you sleep too short a night, you end up having a huge lot of ghrelin in your system when you wake up and very little leptin. So you're going to be hungry pretty much all day. And even when you eat, you are not going to feel full. And that makes weight loss, well, impossible. Pretty much like, the battle. How can you win that kind of battle, right? When you
Yeah.
feel hungry all the time and nothing gives you this sense of, okay, I am good, I am full, I don't need to eat more. So
Mm.
that's another very important aspect. And that's more linked not to the time we go to bed, but to the duration of the night.
Mm.
We need to have a long enough night to make sure that these hormones have time to get well balanced during the night. And the third thing that I would mention when it comes to weight loss is that our brain, like the sole source of energy for our brain when we're not in a starvation mode, is glucose, right? It's sugar that we get from food. And the thing is, when our brain knows that. So when we feel sleepy during the day, sorry, our brain knows that sugar is going to give us like a boost of energy. And so what are we going to like? We're not going to reach for the strawberry or the kale. We're going to reach for something sugary, quick, fast. That's going to give us that boost of energy that we need because we're kind of feeling sleepy and falling asleep. So this is also one thing where sleep really affects our ability to maintain healthy habits. Because
Yeah.
if you're sleepy, you're going to try to compensate with more sugary food, which usually, are not the healthiest for us.
Yeah. For people listening, sometimes people get a little stuck on this and they go, yeah, it's just calories in, calories out. And sometimes I think it's helpful to think of analogies. So for people listening who are kind of questioning the role of hormones, one thing that I always suggest people is, do you know anyone who's gone on birth control and gained 10 pounds in like 10 days? Yes, you do. Do you know anyone who's been on chemo and got like a prednisone shot and they literally 24 hours, they wake up, they're puffy. Like those are hormones. Those are what hormone, the calories in, calories out it's a factor, but unfortunately it's not something we can predict very well. If your hormones are in a different state, the exact same amount of calories will make you thin. The exact same amount of calories can make you overweight. It's just it's a really funny thing to focus on. So this hormonal element is really, really important. We have a distributed team. We've had a distributed team for a long time. We had quite a large team pre-COVID here in Barcelona, but now we're kind of all over again. And I've had staff in the Philippines longer than anywhere else, and we have a bunch of graduates there. So in non-COVID days, I usually go to the Philippines once a year. And this was many, many years ago, probably 9 years ago. I was visiting my staff, and one of our designers, I was like, "How you doing?" He's like, I've gained like 20 pounds. And I was like, what happened? He's like, well, since I started working for you, I'm working night shifts and I just gained weight. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so while I was there, I talked to some of my friends and colleagues, studio owners. They're like, this is a huge problem. They're like, just walk around Manila at night. And I was jet lagged, so I'm walking around and you see all the lights go on. So for those people who don't know, the Philippines is the largest BPO in the world. So there's Hewlett Packard and every major American company and a whole bunch of Western European companies have headquarters there. And it's bigger than India in terms of outsourcing. And so at night, all the lights go on, because they're synced up with Australia or Western Europe or whatever it is. And you go to all the convenience stores, mostly 7-Elevens and things like this, and people are eating poorly, but most importantly, their hormones are screwed up and all kinds of strange things happen. Strange, not good things. Weight gain is really common. There's actually a lot of hormonal imbalances that lead to like kind of asocial sexual behavior where just kind of totally weird stuff, but it's really well documented. And so anyway, that trip, I said, no more. I said, no more. You guys, you're done at 11 or you're done at midnight. Nobody's working overnight. And we made it a policy. And I just said, like, if you're working for me and you have to sacrifice that, it's just not worth it. You don't know what kind of effect that has. And, it's easy to say, oh, it's just 10 pounds or it's just 15 pounds. But that 10 pounds or 15 pounds, that might turn into lethargy that keeps you from the gym, that turns into blood sugar imbalance, that turns into diabetes, that turns into erectile dysfunction, that turns into a broken marriage. It doesn't take that long for a very, very, what somebody might say, superficial problem to turn into something that's really, really a big deal. And I think this is one of the challenges with weight is it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And then suddenly you go, whoa, a decade just went by and suddenly you've got a whole bunch of stuff. And the domino that started this was weight. And I think right now, hopefully a lot of people are starting to wake up to this because at least in the US with comorbidities with COVID, they kind of use this term comorbidity, but the comorbidity, the leading comorbidity was just overweight, right? It's almost everybody in the US. And so that doesn't mean it's an easier problem to solve. That doesn't mean that, but it's still really important to understand that this is not about being lazy. This is not about not having discipline. This isn't about like hardcore gym workouts. This is about a whole complex series of things. And ignoring sleep is a major, major problem with that. And so I think most people listening have a basic idea about sleep hygiene, but I know a lot of people don't. So maybe we can just start there. What are some just basic sleep hygiene things? And again, some of this will seem simplistic, but that's okay. It doesn't mean that everybody's doing it. And if you're having a weight problem, if you're having a sleep problem, is this going to totally reverse? No, but could it make a huge difference? Yes. Could it start you on a path that could really lead to great things? Yeah. So for people who are looking to kind of optimize their sleeping, their bedroom, what kinds of things do you recommend for people?
Mm-hmm. So, well, the very, very first thing, and I think it's the main obstacle to good sleep, is actually just committing to allocating enough time to sleep. Because I see a lot of people who really are convinced that they are sleeping 8 hours every night. But then when you look at their schedule, they actually are, in bed for barely 8 hours. And then there's the time when they actually wake up earlier because they have their yoga practice, or, the time when they have book club and then they go to bed a little bit later, and the time they wake up 3 times in the middle of the night to go check on the kids. So I think the very first thing is, if I want to sleep, let's say 8 hours every night, I cannot just allocate 8 hours to sleep because it takes time to fall asleep. We usually, wake up a few times. So the very first step is to try and allocate a little bit more than that to our sleep and commit to it. And it's not easy, right? I know for me, it took me 3 years to go from 5 hours every night to 8 hours every night. Because if I had just added 3 hours of sleep every single night, I mean, I didn't have a life anymore, right? It feels like, how can you do that? It's not possible, especially with children, when you feel like your only me time is actually once they are in bed.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the very first thing, to try and work towards adding more time dedicated to sleep. And then there are a few mistakes that we make, a lot of us make. And the number one that comes to mind is alcohol. For a lot of us, like having a glass of wine is a way to unwind at night and just kind of relax. And it's true that alcohol really is a relaxant, right? But then it has a rebound effect, and it really messes up the quality of our sleep, not only because it's dehydrating. So we usually end up, running to the bathroom once or twice during the night. And then we feel very thirsty. So we wake up again. And then it really affects the deep sleep, the quality of our deep sleep. Like we end up having a night with more light sleep, which is not as good quality, right? And less deep sleep. So, and when I say alcohol, it's not like, binge drinking every night. It's just even a glass of wine or a beer can really affect the quality of your night. So for people who are struggling with sleep, one thing to really experiment with is to go like 2 weeks with no alcohol at all, just to see what it does and what it doesn't do. So that's one thing. The second thing is, it's very obvious, but it's caffeine. The thing is, and caffeine is one of the reasons I think why we do not take care of our sleep. It's because caffeine erases all the symptoms of sleep deprivation, right? You're exhausted, you drink coffee, you feel better. So we don't really take care of that problem because of that. But the thing is, caffeine really, I'm not saying caffeine is bad and stop drinking coffee, right? Because we can have coffee, but if somebody is struggling with their sleep, they might want to just try again to do 1 or 2 weeks without coffee to see, do they feel tired? Do they sleep better? Like to see what happens, because caffeine can stay in our system for up to 18 hours. So I hear a lot of my clients say, I don't drink coffee afternoon. So I'm all, it's not affecting my sleep, but well, it can actually. So it's worth trying. Again, maybe it won't change anything, but it's worth experimenting with no coffee to see what happens. Another thing that I think is affecting the quality of our sleep a lot is the fact that we have a tendency to make our daily life less and less active. And as a result, we just end up being physically less tired at night. And that has a huge impact on sleep. And this is where I think it's important to shift the focus from sleep itself and trouble sleeping to what do I do with my days? Are my days physically active enough and even mentally active enough that when I go to bed, I am actually tired. Like I hear
Mm.
so many people, they say, oh my gosh, we went camping, we hiked for 6 hours. I slept like a baby. You
Yeah.
know, and it's part of it, right? It's being in nature, but it's also
No.
like when your body is really physically tired,
Mm.
you sleep better. That's one of the requirements for good sleep is actually to have accumulated enough tiredness in your body.
Mm.
And with everything that's so, like you want to get your blinds down, it's electronic or electric, like everything is so convenient. We're not as active physically in our daily life, and I'm not necessarily talking workout, just generally, right? We have people cut our grass, we have people, like we try to make our life so much more physically convenient that we're not moving as much, and that really affects sleep a lot. So I would really suggest to focus on trying to be more active again. Like instead of sitting all day at the computer, stand all day at the computer if you can. Sometimes there are little tweaks that we can make that just help us be more tired at the end of the day, and aiming towards that is very important. So that those are, I mean, some of them
Yeah.
that come to mind, but really shifting the focus also away from the sleep, because when
Yeah.
people are very focused on, or like tracking sleep and how many
Yeah.
hours of deep sleep do I get and all that, it can really be anxiety creating,
Yeah.
and it can also kill your sleep in itself, just because you're so worried you're not going to sleep enough or well.
Yeah. That kind of tees up my next question. What do you think about tracking apps, meditation, sleepy music, any of this kind of stuff? Like, is it helpful? Is it better just to get the screens out of the room? Do you recommend people track their sleep? Do they keep a sleep journal, or what's been your experience?
So from what I've seen, I think that tracking for a short period of time, just to
Mm.
learn about yourself. And this is
Yeah.
something that I do in my book. Like there is a tracker,
Mm-hmm.
and you do that for a week or two. I think it can be very healthy
Yeah.
because it creates awareness. You learn about yourself. You learn about your body and your needs. So I think that's very important. Now, tracking in the long run, some people need it. Some people really like to track
Sure.
things, and it's totally fine if it works for them. But what
Yeah.
I've noticed is that, again, shifting the focus from the problem to the solutions, instead of focusing so much on the sleep, focusing
Right.
more on, the day. What do I do with my day? And the apps, I think that one of the main problems with sleep is that we are on all the time. We're on
Mm.
alert, right? Our brain is on. So having the phone, even if the phone is on silent and whatever, if you have your phone by the bed, chances are you might be tempted to look at it. If you wake up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you might check it, and that's some nice blue light getting into your brain and telling you, hey, it's time to wake up. Don't go back to sleep. Look, it's light out there. So I have a tendency to say, if you can get the phone, maybe your devices out of the bedroom, it's great. On the other hand, well, maybe it's going to create even more anxiety, because you're going to be like, oh, but what if my kids are calling me? And
Yeah.
I'm a mom of 3 teenagers, so I know, like they're away. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to sleep without my phone, right?
Yeah.
Because that would create even more anxiety.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very individual, it's just like nutrition. It's a very
Sure.
individual thing. But once we have tracked, usually for a few days or maybe a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
we learn so much about what makes us not sleep well.
Yeah.
Right? Like if it's your brain being on high alert, then this is something to address. If
Right.
it's you being too hot at night, and that I know, like I work a lot with women who are going through menopause and
Mm.
perimenopause, and the night sweat are really an issue.
Mm.
And in that case, we need to focus more on having like super, super light dinners, for instance, to make sure that the heat from digesting is not going to add up to the night sweat, which will definitely make you wake up in the middle of the night. So that's also, if someone is struggling with sleep and waking up, during the night, falling asleep fine, but waking up early, like 3, 4 a.m. This is something to really look at, the dinners, and trying to go do 7 days with just a small salad, for instance, or a soup, and see what happens. Do you sleep better? So it's a lot about experimenting with things and seeing what happens.
I love this idea of focusing on the solution rather than the problem, because you're exactly right. People they start tracking, and I got 5.5, and then I woke up at 2, and people tell me this too. I woke up at 2:36 in the morning, and then I couldn't fall asleep till 3:31. It's like you can really get obsessed, and then the negative thing becomes what you focus on. You focus on how little, and inevitably you can always find a reason why there's not enough time, not enough sleep, whatever. But if you focus on the positives, at the very least, probably you're going to start to increase your sleep time, increase your sleep quality. I think it's a really interesting place to focus. Stella, for people who want to pick up your book, who want to connect with you online, tell people where to find you.
Sure. So the book is available on Amazon. The title is Sleep It Off, and it comes with a workbook to do all the exercises. And the workbook is downloadable on my website, which is allonsy-coaching.com, ALLONZ coaching.com. And allons-y means let's go in French. And you can also look me up with my name, but I think going on the website is where you get everything, and then links to my Facebook and Instagram and all that.
You've probably noticed that in the past couple of years, yoga, breathing, pranayama, breathwork of all types has exploded in popularity. Right about the time when my TED Talk on breathing dropped, it seemed like the whole world got the bug at the same time as me, and everyone's interested in breathing. The challenge is that most people who subscribe to Yoga Body, most of our listeners who are interested in breathing, they're looking for stress management, they're looking for improved sleep, boosted digestion, energy balance. They're not looking to hold their breath for 7 minutes. They don't want to swim under a frozen lake. They're not looking for cold exposure or Guinness Book of World Records. Most people that I meet and I talk to, they're looking for ways to control their nervous system that are safe and accessible and really effective. Yoga breathing really offers that. Meditation and other seated practices can be really intimidating, and the follow-through is really low. Yoga breathing is not intimidating at all, and the compliance, the follow-through is really, really high. That's why our breathing coaches are so successful. They're working from home on Zoom. They're teaching in yoga studios, CrossFit boxes, fitness centers, and gyms. And many of them are actually working with corporate clients to help people manage their stress. This breath coach training is such a unique and exciting program. We go over the anatomy, the physiology of breath. We also cover the business and marketing of being a breath coach, and we give you all the tools you need to go from zero to setting up your own breath coaching business in the span of 12 days. To learn more about the program, please go to breathcoachtraining.com, and I hope you can join us. This week's nutritional tip is in response to a question from Jonathan on Instagram. Jonathan says, Lucas, I'm trying my best to eat with the seasons. I'm just not really sure what is in season and what's not. If you're trying to eat naturally and eat seasonally, how are you supposed to decide what's even natural? I like this question a lot, Jonathan, because so many people in health and wellness are nostalgic, and they have this idealization of a future time where the future looks like the past, and we return to an agrarian culture where we all have 2 chickens and a pig and a cornfield out in the back of our house, and that is absolutely not happening. This idea of eating seasonal is really beautiful. Unfortunately, it's not practical, it's not realistic, and it doesn't really make any sense. If you walk into the grocery store, almost nothing you will see in that grocery store is native to where you live, and almost none of it is truly in season. Now, it might be growing season for you right now for strawberries, but very unlikely that strawberries grew where you're living. I'm making some assumptions here, Jonathan, but I don't know. And so whatever we're talking about, there are very few foods that are native to where you're living. For some reason, people romanticize the past. I think it comes from like biblical stories about Adam and Eve, and we imagine these gardens with food everywhere or something like that. That's not what it was like. It was like starvation, right? It's about running around trying to kill lizards and eat their tails and try to find some weeds to eat and things like this. This abundance of Granny Smith apples and iceberg lettuce and salmon from Norway. This is just a cornucopia that we have never seen before. If you want to eat seasonally, basically starve yourself and eat grubs that you find under a rock, and eat some acorns and stuff like that. That's seasonal. Now, eating fresh and local foods, there's a real argument to be made for that. And so the bioavailability of micronutrients, it's usually higher in fresh food. So as foods spend more time on the shelf, they become kind of lifeless. Their enzymes die, and the bioavailability, especially of some vitamins, can be reduced. So fresh is always best, of course. So if you're eating things that are locally grown, that's, of course, making a lot more sense from a health perspective, makes a lot more sense from an environmental perspective. But I don't get so caught up on the season, because it just doesn't really make sense. Now, I will give you some other examples that I think do make a lot of sense. When I lived in Thailand, very often foreigners would come and they would order salmon. There's no salmon in Southeast Asia, right? They're ordering Norwegian farmed salmon that's getting flown in on an airplane that's been in a freezer for a year and a half. This doesn't make any sense, right? And so thinking about those kinds of things, if you're wanting to weigh options, I think that makes a lot of sense. Eating in season doesn't really make any sense. There's nothing natural about the way we're eating. There's nothing natural about the way we're living, except that this is what's natural right now. And this dream paradise where all the food we need grows in our backyards and there's abundance, that never happened. It just never happened. The story of human history is starvation and struggle and toil, gathering food. There are still some hunter-gatherer tribes that exist, by the way, and they spend all day hunting for food, and they eat anything they can find, anything, including primates, including bats, absolutely anything. So it's a really challenging thing. I don't think it really makes sense. And there's a lot of dietary approaches that really focus on this. A lot of Ayurvedic systems focus on this, eating what's in season, eating what's with the temperature, this idea that, you should eat warm foods in the winter and cold foods in the summer. I mean, if that works for you, go for it. My experience has been a lot of the hottest countries that I've traveled to have really spicy foods and sometimes even really warm foods. I don't think it's the place to put your focus if you're looking to make the greatest changes. Fresh is best for sure. Local, if you can get it, for sure. Those are great options. But trying to tap into your local area, what was actually there 300 years ago, probably there was a whole lot of nothing. And so I hope that's helpful. Keep going. We have a listener question from Kenneth on Instagram. Kenneth says, Lucas, I trained with you 2.5 years ago to become a yoga teacher, and a big part of your teaching was physical touch. What do you think will happen post-COVID? I'm just curious what you think the future holds for yoga teachers. Kenneth, in all of our trainings, we used to always teach show, tell, touch as essential teaching tools. Show meaning demonstrate, gesture, use your body. Tell is your public speaking skills, and touch is to connect with students kinesthetically, physically. We don't do it anymore. We stopped. My thesis is that is no longer going to be socially or maybe even legally acceptable depending on where you are in the world. I have a feeling health regulations will come to gyms and yoga studios and fitness professionals. It might take a little while to get here, but it's not clear to me that this time of infectious disease is over. It's very possible that we're entering a new era where infectious disease risk is ever present, and perhaps the way we interact with each other just needs to change. Now, I know immediately that puts a lot of people on guard and they get upset and they want to go back to the old way. Here in Spain, people want to do 2 kisses and all these things, and that would be nice, but I'm not sure if the future looks like the past. I kind of think no. So in terms of what I'm doing going forward is I'm not touching anyone. Will that change? Not sure. I'm just rolling with the future and trying to do my best to take care of students. And currently, it doesn't seem to make sense to touch people, and I'm not sure it will anytime soon. But I think that will vary greatly from country to country and culture to culture. I think depending on the severity of the experience during the pandemic and depending on how administrations react post-pandemic, I think that's going to really determine how people behave to a large extent. So I don't have an answer, but my thesis going forward is don't touch people. Let's see what happens. Thanks for listening to The Lucas Rockwood Show. If you enjoy the podcast, I have 2 asks of you. Number 1, share the show on social media with your friends and tag me. My handle is @LucasRockwood. Number 2 is please leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on. And last but not least, before you go, if you'd like to be on my mailing list, every week I send out information about the podcast, behind the scenes stuff, announcements of online classes and special events. I email about once a week. You can do that at yogabody.com/sign me up. And right now we have a free breathing worksheet on that page as well. It's yogabody.com/sign me up. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.